It may look like I'm surrounded by you. Come on, courage. It may look like I'm surrounded by you. It may look like I'm surrounded by you. Yes, I am. It may look like I'm surrounded. Come on. It may look like I'm surrounded by you. Again. It may look like I'm surrounded. This is how I fight. Oh, this is how I fight my battles. This is how I fight my battles. Oh, this is how I fight my battles. Come on, lion inside. Oh, this is how I fight my battles. Oh, this is how I fight my battles. Oh, this is how I fight my battles. It may look like I'm surrounded, but I'm surrounded by you. It may look like I'm surrounded, but I'm surrounded by you. It may look like I'm surrounded, but I'm surrounded by you. 'Cause this is how I fight my battles. Come on! This is how I fight my battles. This is how I fight. Yeah. Oh, this is how I fight my battles. This is how I fight battles. This is how I fight my battles. Oh, you came. I knew that you would come. Oh, you sang. In my heart it woke up. Oh, I'm not afraid. Oh, I see your face. I am alive 'cause you came. I knew that you would come. you came. I knew that you would come. You sang. My heart just woke up. I'm not afraid now. I see your face. I am alive 'cause you came. I knew that you would come. You woke me right on up. Everybody else said I was a lost cause, but you stood at the foot of my grave and you called out my name, and you sang a better word over me. Oh, I knew that you would come. I knew you'd never give up, 'cause that's just who you are. You don't change who you are. There's no darkness that can hide who you are. Let me always remember who you are. Oh, you came. I knew that you would come. You said, my heart woke up. I'm not afraid, now I've seen your face. I am alive 'cause you came. I just knew that you would come. You are here, moving in this place. Oh, I worship you. I worship you. You are here. Oh, you're working in this place. I worship you. I worship you. You are here. Oh, you're moving in our midst. I worship you. Oh, I worship you. You are here. Oh, you're working in this place. I worship you. I worship you, Waymaker. Waymaker, miracle worker, promise keeper, light in the darkness. Oh my God, that is who you are here. You're touching our hearts. You are here. Oh, you're touching every heart. Oh, I worship you. Oh, I worship you. You are here. Oh, you're healing every heart. Oh, I worship you. Oh, I worship you. You are here. Oh, you're mending every heart. Oh, I worship you. Oh, I worship you. You are here. You're turning lives. You are here. Oh, you're turning lives around. Oh, I worship you. Oh, I worship you. You are. maker, yes. Way maker, miracle worker, promise keeper, light in the darkness. Oh my God, that is who you are. 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 Oh, I trust in who you are. Even when I don't see it, you're working. Even when I can't feel it, you're working. You never stop. You never stop working. You never stop. You never stop. Even when I don't see it, you're working. Even when I can't feel it, you're working. You never stop. Come on. Stop. That's who he is. Even when you can't feel it. Come on. Even when I don't feel it, you're working. Even when I can't feel it, you're working. You never stop. Come on. Again. Even when I can see it, you're working. Even when I don't feel it, you're working. You never stop. You never stop working. You never stop. You never stop working. You never stop working. Oh, it's time to strike the ground. Even when I don't feel it, you're working. Even when I don't feel it, you're working. Come on. You never stop working. You never stop. You never stop working. Even when I don't see it, you're working. Even when I don't feel it, you're working. You never again. Oh, you never stop working. Even when I can't. Even when I don't see it, you're working. Even when I don't feel it, you're working. You never stop. You never stop. You never stop working. You never stop. You never stop working. You never stop. You never stop working. Strike the ground. Strike the ground. Oh, strike the ground. Oh, strike the ground. Oh, strike the ground. Oh, we want to see you working. Give us eyes to see. Give us eyes to see. Even when I don't see it, you're working. Even when I don't feel it, you're working. You never stop. You never stop working. Just one more time. See it, you're working. Feel it, you're working. Never stop working. I feel like there's an invitation tonight. One more time. That's all I keep hearing in my mind. Just one more time. Not one more time the song. One more time. One more prayer. Just one more. Just one more. You're one prayer away from what you've been longing for, what you've been waiting for. You're one prayer away. One prayer. If you stop now, it will not happen. Amen? Oh, come on. Don't stop. Never stop. So how many of you have been praying for something for a really long time and you're like, I'm not doing it anymore? Right? One more. One more. All it takes is one touch. One drop. One drop. Come on, one more. Be bold, be courageous. Even when I don't see it, you're working. Even when I can't feel it, you're working. You never stop. You never stop working. Stop. Come on. Even when I don't feel it, you're working. You never stop. You never stop working. You never stop. You never stop working. Even when I don't see it, you're working. Oh, even when I can feel it, you're working. You never stop. You never stop working. You never stop. You never stop working. Even when I don't see it, you're working. Oh, even when I can't feel it, you're working. You never stop. You never stop. You never stop. You never stop. Oh, you never stop. You never stop working. The river never, never stops flowing. The river never, ever, ever stops flowing. Oh, Waymaker, come on. Waymaker, promise keeper, light in the darkness. Oh my God. Oh, Waymaker, promise keeper. Ha. Waymaker, Waymaker, miracle, promise keeper. There's one thing that stood out to each one of you on that little line. Some of you tonight need a promise keeper. Some of you need a waymaker. Some of you need a miracle worker. Some of you need it all. So I'm going to sing that chorus one more time, and I don't want you to focus on the words. Whenever that lyric comes up, I want you to grab hold, because everything that we need is in the kingdom, right? What you need, He is. He is the great I am. Come on. Waymaker, miracle worker, promise keeper, light in the darkness, my God. Whatever that you need, shout it out. Come on. Waymaker, miracle worker, promise keeper, light in the darkness, that is who you are. That is who you are. That is who you are. You are. Oh, that is who you just are. You are. Mountains shake before you, the demons run and flee. It's just the mention of your name. The mountains shake before you, the demons run and flee. That's just the mention of your name. Waymaker, He is. He is. Waymaker, promise keeper, my God.
Well, Heavenly Father, Lord, worship.
lift you up. I exalt thee. I exalt thee. Oh, Lord, I exalt thee.
Lord, we lift your name up. We lift your name up. You are worthy of our praise. We lift your name up. You are worthy.
I exalt thee.
Hallelujah.
I exalt
Ora baba
thee.
shida ra ra ba karata. You are worthy of our praise. You are worthy. You are worthy. One more time, I exalt thee.
You are worthy.
Yes.
You are
Worthy.
You are worthy.
Oh Lord, you are worthy. We worship you, Jesus. You are worthy. You are worthy. You are worthy. Hallelujah. You are worthy of our praise. Lord, we thank you for you are good. You are worthy of our praise. Praise you. Hallelujah. Amen. Wow. Praise the Lord. Tonight, Jesus, body of Christ, tastes like frosted flakes. Now I got that stuck in my head. Too much. So, I want to talk a little bit tonight. I don't imagine I'm going to spend a lot of time, but every time I've ever said that, it's long. So, I feel like the Lord wants to do something. And, different people share differently. Preach. People who have manuscripts and they virtually read off of them. That's fine. There's other people that have outlines. That's fine. Last week I read something verbatim, which is very unusual. But it was so specific that I felt like I needed to read words exactly the way the Lord showed them to me. And like for example, when Shannon ministered last week in Georgia, she poured herself into it and poured herself into it, and it was very fruitful and very well prepared. But Dr. Tom Jones of Global Awakening says it better. He said that a prepared heart is much better than any prepared sermon. And so, in saying that, that's my excuse if tonight makes no sense. No, I have a thought process that the Lord has been showing me, and I pray that I'm able to get it across clearly, so that we can truly begin to step into what God is calling us to do, and more importantly, who He's calling us to be. Last week I started talking about this idea of the sons of Issachar, where it talks about where they saw the signs of the time, and because of that, they knew what to do. They saw the signs of the time, and because of that, they were able to instruct, and Israel was able to do and adjust and shape the way they lived according to what was going on in the times. And unfortunately, often we find ourselves as humanity, and then as the church, particularly the American church, we find ourselves living in a bubble that we think that things are the way that they are, our current situation, and that they're that way everywhere for everybody. And when you begin to have encounters with different cultures and different situations, you begin to realize that the bubble that you live in is not reality. I remember the first time I went to Haiti, Pastor Rick and another guy, and I remember seeing the tremendous need everywhere we went. But there was this temptation in my thinking, because here we are, the great white American hope showing up in this country full of poverty and despair, thinking that we needed to do all these things to give them what we have, when the reality is if they wanted to, they could have the things that we have. And it took me a little bit of time to figure that out. But as I began to figure that out, what I realized was my bubble was beginning to be busted. And we live in this time where we are seeing things through merely the lens of our current, what we perceive to be reality. And it's important for us as believers to understand the reality that's going on in not just America, but in the world that we live in. And we must understand the signs of the times, just like the sons of Issachar, so we will know what to do. Not just what we will know what to do for our own lives, but for our families, for our region, for our nation. We have to know what to do in order to shift the world that we live in to encounter the fullness of the gospel. Make sense to you? And so in Matthew chapter 16, there's a very interesting story. Starting in verse 1, it reads, Pharisees and Sadducees came, and to test him, they asked him to show them a sign from heaven. And he answered them, when it is evening, you say, it will be fair weather, for the sky is red. And in the morning, it will be stormy today, for the sky is red and threatening. So Jesus is kind of they ask him for a sign, and he's confronting this idea that says, listen, Pharisees and the Sadducees, you see the current weather situation, and you are wise enough to recognize what's going on in the natural. Right? Isn't there an old saying about the color of skies and the sea and all that? And I don't know it, but I know there's one like that. How's it go? Red sky at night, sailor's delight. Okay. Sailor take warning if there's a red sky in the morning? Okay. If you ever sail with me, you just need to know, never pretty. I feed the fish the whole way. Terrible. And so Jesus is addressing this idea that says, you know what's going on in the natural based on your experience. But you're asking for a sign from heaven. Now keep in mind who he's talking to. He's talking to the Pharisees and the Sadducees. So the Pharisees, what you have to understand is they were like the local priest. They were like each rural area had a synagogue, and the Pharisees were the local pastors, basically, of those synagogues outside of Jerusalem. And the Sadducees typically were the ones who were overseeing temple worship. So these are the people that temple worship in Jerusalem. So these are the people that were basically the spiritual fathers for the nation of Israel. And they're talking to this rabbi who they probably give no credit to other than the fact that he has stirred up the world they live in. Right? This bastard son of Mary, Joseph isn't quite sure if he's going to claim him. Right? You kind of get the picture. They all know who he is. You don't think that the rumors travel? And so they're saying, show us a sign from heaven. And he tells them, listen, you know enough to interpret the environment to know what's going on in the natural. And he says, you know how to interpret the appearance of the sky, but you cannot interpret the signs of the times. And I think that this is one of the leading things going on right now. And I can only speak directly to the American church. We are missing the point because we're looking at what's going on in the natural and not what's going on in the spirit. And the reason we're looking at what's going on in the natural is because it is being jammed down our throats constantly through the media, social media, through opinions of others. Right? It's very simple. Listen, think about how insane this is. We live in a world that your employer is now, many employers are now mandating health choices for their employees. And if they don't come into alignment with those, they will lose their job. So what happens if another 15 or 20% of the workforce in America say, nope, not doing it? We think that the Great Depression of 90 years ago was bad. Wait till we step into this one. 100 years ago, wait till we step into this one. And so, but the thing is we're looking at things short-sighted. We're looking at things in the carnal because that is our focus too often. Our focus too often is how the things that are going on in the world affect me personally. That's what the Pharisees and Sadducees were looking at because they saw the ministry of Jesus as something that was threatening their personal ministry as well as their religious and legal systems and political systems in which they functioned. Because Jesus upset the apple cart. So he tells them, you don't know how to interpret the signs of the times. In verse 4 he says, an evil and adulterous generation seeks a sign, but no sign will be given to it except the sign of Jonah. So he left and departed. And so here's the thought process. Here's the thought process. Most people, it's very difficult to really identify what Jesus is saying here when he says that the sign of Jonah. And many people will say when Jesus is talking about the only sign you will see is the sign of Jonah, is that Jesus was going to die, spend 3 days in the tomb, just like Jonah spent in the whale's belly. Right? It's a very easy conclusion to come to. But I'm not sure that's what Jesus meant. I'm not sure that's what Jesus meant. As I've been looking at this for some time, and when I say sometimes, I've been looking at this idea of the sign of Jonah probably for 3 years. And just from time to time, I would just seek the Lord in it. And I'm coming to a different conclusion. Now listen, the other, I have no problem with. I am totally on board with it. We can be on board with that one, and we're going to add something to it. Deal? What if the sign of Jonah was the very idea that the Lord would send his messenger, Jonah, to a people group that Israel hated? The Ninevites. What if the sign of Jonah is not necessarily 3 days in the tomb, but the fact that the gospel of the kingdom was going to go out of the nation of Israel? What if the sign of Jonah was the thing that said, chosen people of God, nation of Israel, you have missed the signs. You can tell the weather, you can know what's going to happen, but you don't know what's happening in the spirit because you're short-sighted and blind, and I'm going to take this gospel first for the Jews, then the Gentile. And they missed it. And so Jesus doesn't argue with fools. Have you ever noticed that? Jesus doesn't argue. Jesus doesn't argue, and this is a lesson that I've learned from looking at Jesus. Jesus will confront. Jesus will tell you the way it is. Jesus will console. Jesus will correct, but he never argues. You know that, you remember, I love it when the Pharisees say, hey, where's your dad? Where's your father? And he says, you don't know me or my Father. Think about that. He doesn't argue. He just goes, hiya. And so Jesus doesn't argue with fools. And so I've kind of made that decision myself. I will not argue. I won't do it. And so, looking back in verse 5, it says, when the disciples reached the other side, they had forgotten to bring any bread. And Jesus said to them, watch and beware of the leaven of the Pharisees and Sadducees. Now, this is after a boat ride. They had gotten to the other side. We don't know what they talked about on the boat ride. But when they had gotten to the other side, they realized that they forgot food. They were always forgetting food. Think about this for a second. The greatest opportunities for ministry in Jesus' ministry with his disciples is when they forgot food. And we're going to look a little bit at the 4,000 and 5,000 feeding. But what about when they didn't have any food in Samaria and he got to hang out at Jacob's well with the woman, the Samaritan woman? So Jesus says to them, watch and beware of the leaven of the Pharisees and Sadducees. And they began to discuss it among themselves, saying, we brought no bread. Again, these guys were missing it, right? But Jesus, aware of this, said, O you of little faith, why are you discussing among yourselves that you have no bread? Did you not yet perceive? Do you not remember the 5 loaves for the 5,000 and how many baskets you gathered? Or the 7 loaves for the 4,000? Or how many how many baskets you gathered? How is it that you fail to understand that if I do not speak about bread, that I did not speak about bread, but beware of the leaven of the Pharisees and the Sadducees, then they understood he did not tell them to be beware of the leaven of bread, but of the teachings of the Pharisees and Sadducees. And so they were concerned about food, and Jesus was concerned about their mind. They were concerned about bread, and Jesus was concerned about their heart. And he gives them a warning that says, beware of the leaven of the Pharisees and Sadducees, with the idea when he says, when Jesus is warning about leaven, he's warning about the seeds of sin and discord and rebellion, because leaven, if you don't know, I'll explain it, is basically yeast. And when you add it to the dough, it will cause it to grow. So here's what we have to realize. Jesus is warning the disciples to not participate in the religious spirit or the political spirit. Because the Pharisees operated in a religious spirit and the Sadducees operated in a political spirit. And if you consider the world we live in, both of them are in high operation. And both of them seeks to divide. Now, I realized last week I talked about the divide and harvest is coming. I'm talking about being unequally, that's talking about being unequally yoked within the body of Christ. Different subject. And so what we have to consider then is Jesus is warning his disciples, do not allow the teachings of the Pharisees, the religious system, and the Sadducees, the political system, to come into your life and to grow and cause you to step off of the very personhood and the very plan and the very direction that Jesus is introducing the gospel of the kingdom to the world like they've never seen. And it's so interesting to me because both the religious and the political systems are that in themselves. They're simply a system. When Jesus calls us into faith, the systems are easier. You know that, right? Systems are easier because you know that if you do this, this will happen. You know that if you follow this formula, these things will happen. But that is not the way that the Lord works. He's calling the people of the church out of systems. He's calling us out of religious and political systems that are causing us to not walk by faith because we're not looking at the signs of the time. And if we look at the signs of the time, it's going to be the greatest time where we're going to need to walk by faith, not based on what we thought would work because it worked in the past. Jesus said, do you not remember the 5 loaves that were used to feed the 5,000? Do you not remember? And then he says, do you not remember the 7 loaves that were required to feed the 4,000? Have you ever wondered why Jesus used 5 loaves to feed 5,000 and 7 loaves to feed 4,000? I believe it's because the Lord will do more, place a greater demand. Say that again. The Lord wants to do more when we place a greater demand on it. Bill Johnson, in his book, When Heaven Invades Earth, talks about church. And this isn't a negative thing that he's saying, but this is what he says. He says, in many circles, the church, because it no longer takes risks, because it is basically joined into the religious system, that they can do anything that's possible as long as they have enough people and enough money. You bring enough people and enough money together, you can do amazing things. You know what I'm talking about? But here's the deal. So can the Elks Club. So can the Kiwanis. So can the Rotary. And so the idea is that the church has to operate in such a way that if Holy Spirit does not work beside us and we cooperate with Him, we will fail every time because the demand that we will place on Him is greater than anything we can do on our own. The Lord is wanting us to put demand on Him. He's wanting us to bring 5 loaves to feed 5,000. That's what He's wanting, because He's calling us to see the signs of the time and to step out of religious and political systems and say, this is not about a system that man will do to gain power. This is not about a system that man will do to have worship services and events. This is about relationship that says, as a son and a daughter, you understand the greater demand that you put on your Father, the more He delights in giving you what you need. Beware the leaven, Pharisees, religious, the Sadducees, political. Beware of the systems that are created so that all you have to do is follow the formula to convince yourself that you are in right standing with God. You know, the religious spirit is so interesting because it demands payment. You know that, right? The religious spirit demands payment. It demands that somebody pay. And it can never, ever, 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 ever be wrong. And it will be right until it puts itself in a place of isolation and lowliness and sit back and point its finger at everybody in the world as though they have abandoned them, while they think that they're taking a religious high road. And the reason we know that the Lord isn't operating in that is because the Lord operates in relationship. The Lord operates in relationship. So when the religious spirit demands payment and requires to be right, what it does is it alienates itself from others, causing you to have to either get in line with it or it will remove relationship. That's not really the way it works. A religious spirit demands that you conform to what it wants you to be. And the political spirit uses sly words and trickery, not to get you to be what it wants you to be, but to do what it wants you to do. To live your life in complete and total obedience to the political system that has been established. And this is not an American political system. No matter where you go in the world, the political spirit says, bow down to me. No matter where you go in the world, You can be here in free America that's not so free anymore. Bow down to me. Now, I mean, think about this for a second. You know, in the medical field, medical doctors and nurses and counselors and all these people, they have to take kind of, I don't know if oath is the right word, but to do no harm. Right? But the political spirit in America is so rampant right now, and it's demonic. You have to understand, this is demonic. That I just read the other day that there's a woman in South Carolina that they removed her name from the transplant list for a kidney because she won't get a COVID shot. But what about do no harm? What about do no harm? What about the very oath, the very thing that the medical community stands on to say do no harm? They are now doing harm because of the political spirit. And so the political spirit requires you to bow down. But I would say that if we pay attention to the signs, this is so exciting. If we pay attention to the signs, and I shared this with you last week, the only two places in the world that the church is not growing faster than population is United States and Canada. Well, that's very sad for an American. No, it's not. Because to me, if the sign of Jonah is the gospel of the kingdom going out to all of the world, even those that Israel did not like, what I have to look at is the entire Muslim world, the gospel of the kingdom is going out. I have to look at that and I have to realize, wait a minute, are you saying that the gospel of the kingdom is growing faster in communist, Buddhist, humanistic China than it is? Yes. Are you saying that in Japan, that the gospel, that Christianity is growing faster than population where they are Buddhist? Yes. In India, where there's billions of Hindus worshiping millions of gods, but Christianity is growing faster there than it is population? Can you imagine the rate of population growth in India? But Christianity is growing faster than the population. Because the sign of Jonah is that the gospel of the kingdom is going out to those who Israel, who the Pharisees and the Sadducees of 2,000 years ago would have thought were unworthy of salvation from the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and it is going out like wildfire. Let's pay attention to the signs of the time. Let's pay attention to what's going on in our world. What do you think that's going on? Why do you think that's happening? Why do you think that the church in Cuba is growing faster than the population? Why do you think that is? Why do you think when he goes and he does crusades, that they pray for people that have cancerous tumors and the tumors fall on the ground? Why do you think that when they have people with blind eyes, the eyes are open? Why do you think when they have people with dental problems, all of a sudden they have gold teeth in the back of their mouth? It's because the demand that they're placing on God is greater than the demand that we place on it. They don't rely on their governments to meet their need. They don't rely on the doctors to meet their needs. They don't rely on their jobs to pay their bills. Every day they have to step into faith. Every day they're looking at a situation where they have to feed 5,000 and all they have is 5 loaves. This is throughout the world. The American church, we get upset if the air is too hot or too cold. It's cold today. In the American church, we get upset if the sermon goes 10 minutes too long. This little mountain that Pastor Rick and I used to go to. It's a big mountain, actually, in Haiti. I remember going down the road at 4 in the morning on this mountain and watching people walking on the side of the road. And I would say, where are they going? Then all of a sudden, we drive by this little church out in the middle of nowhere that had walls this, waist high, chain link fence up to a tin roof. And they would be there, they'd get there at 4:30 in the morning so they can have a 4 to 6 hour prayer meeting while it was still cool. But the thing is, here's the thing, they need food. They need food. They need health care. They need all these things, but instead, you know what they're doing? They're going and they're putting a demand on the King of the universe, the creator of the universe, and they say, Lord, all I have is 5 loaves. What are you going to do with them? What are you going to do with these 5 loaves? That's all we have. I think we're coming to a time, and see, I've considered some things over the last couple of years. And I don't want to make a big statement right now. I just want to share a couple of things that I've considered. I believe that the Lord has established America because the people who established America love the Lord. Israel was established because God loved people. America was established because people loved God. And I believe that the Lord, for the last 250 years, has used America as a light, a beacon in the world to release the goodness of the gospel of the kingdom, even with its imperfections and its warts and its problems and its dysfunctions, corruption, and all of these things. There has been this thing where America has been a light, city on a hill. And part of me wants to grab a hold of that and say, the Lord is going to restore that, and we're going to be a city on a hill, and America is going to continue to grow and do the things that it's doing. And then part of me asks the question to the Lord, Lord, are you removing options so that we have to place a greater demand on you? The part of me that likes comfort wants the first. The part of me that hungers for His presence in every area of my life doesn't want to reject the second. Can there be both? I don't know. Doesn't seem to be when you look around the world. Doesn't seem to be when you look around the world. So, when we consider the signs of the time, we have to understand that right now we are in this time where the religious and the political spirits are trying to suck us in. Look, I love politics. I do. I think it's interesting. But you know what I've discovered this season in America? It's like they don't even hide. Like, when you know they're lying, but they're actually trying to make it seem like they're telling the truth. They don't even do that anymore. It's like the crazier the lie, the more they say it. And the eyes and the ears of the people in America hear it and they believe it. I mean, come on. Coronavirus is not spreading because of global warming. It's not. It's not spreading because of cows fart too much. It's not, but that's the crazy stuff they're saying. Because what's happened is we are not seeing the signs of the time. And is it possible, I'm not trying to be prophetic here, but I'm wanting us to think. Is it possible that the Lord is allowing us to come to this place where we have to say, we have to watch and beware of the leaven of the Pharisees and the Sadducees, the religious and the political spirit that operate void of relationship with God, because he wants to bring us to a place where we're going to operate with 5 loaves to feed 5,000. That doesn't happen when you have 5 loaves, because that's with a small group of people and a small amount of money, and we do things that large groups of people with large amounts of money do, because Holy Spirit is the thing that's moving it. One is exciting for a moment. The other is exciting for a lifetime. You know that thing when you find yourself at the edge all the time, and it's either fail, or victory? You know, there's no, I took a whooping, but I'll go back later. It's all or nothing. And I just sense that this is the thing that the Lord is calling us into. It's this thing of risk, regardless of reward. Robbie Dawkins says it like this, that the way you spell faith is R-I-S-K. I feel like the Lord is calling us into this 5 loaves season. And it's not to accomplish things that are comfortable, but it's this idea that God is going to partner with risk that requires demand on him so that the gospel of the kingdom will be furthered. You know, so Pastor Rick was talking in prayer time, and he did it last week, about how he challenged us to pay attention to atmospheres that we enter and shift them in the Spirit. Well, you know, that's a 5 loaves situation. Well, what do you mean, Pastor Lee? That's just me walking into a grocery store and seeing what's going to happen. Yeah, but if you've never done that before, all or nothing. Succeed or be a fool. This is the kind of thing, because we're at this season where America needs the gospel of the kingdom and people of relationship more than we need religion and politics. Because religion and politics are systems, but when Jesus said, beware of those things, what is he doing? What is he doing with his disciples? And when they start talking about food and they're spending their time together, he's talking about relationship and remember what I did. Draws them into relationship, and he says, don't you remember what I did with the 5 loaves for the 5,000 and the 7 loaves for the 4? Don't you remember? I'm faithful. We can build this relationship on my faithfulness, not your resources. So I believe that the Lord wants us to really set our hearts on him. Set our hearts on him and his presence in our lives. You know, the Lord wants us to partner with him in what he's doing. But before we go and do all of these, I'd much rather just share presence with him. Presence, our presence, sharing space. Because we look for signs he's not looking to show signs, which, we'll have another discussion another day of how signs point and make you wonder. Talk about that another day. That's a different subject. We look for signs of God, but rather God is saying, don't look for signs that, other than the fact that I love humanity enough to go after them. That's what he's doing. He's going after the segment of the humanity on earth right now that has to make the greatest demand on his character and his nature in order to live. He's going after the people in the world that say, I need him or I die. And then when I get him, I very well may die anyway. The Lord is wanting us to make a demand on his presence, his character. Let's stand. Well. Close your eyes. No. I feel like the Lord's wanting me to do something He's never asked me to do. That I can recall. Close your eyes. I'm going to begin to pray in tongues. A moment. And what I felt like he said is, as I begin to do that, the presence is going to move around the room. You're going to experience a touch from it. You're going to feel something. Internally, externally, I don't know, but you're going to feel a shift. What I want you to do when you feel that shift, I just want you to keep your eyes closed, and I want you to realize that that's his presence partnering with you. You're then sharing his presence and him sharing you. Then I want you to just, as that happens, I just want you to slip your hand in the air because I want to be able to identify where it's happening in the room. Then we'll see what he's going to do after that. If you're experiencing a shift, just let me know by raising your hand. Holy Spirit. Yes, there it is. More, Lord. There it is. More love. The Lord is breaking through a fear of provision. Wants to break through that you're afraid that he's not going to provide. That you raise your hand. The Lord is some of you are resistant to his presence because you're afraid that he's going to ask you to do something you don't want to do. If that's you, just raise your hand. The good news is you're right. He's going to ask you to do something you don't want to do. What up? I'm going to pray. And if the Lord is touching you, you want additional prayer, ministry, I'm going to invite you forward to do that. We'll pray for you. But the Lord is wanting to release His courage. I really sense that He's wanting to release two things. He's wanting to release a sense of relationship that the disciples would oftentimes forget, because He was warning them about the religious and political systems, and He was reminding them of provision and relationship that comes when you make a demand on Him. And I believe that the Lord is wanting to draw us back into that. But as I've called a couple different things out, many of you responded to those. Well, the Lord wants to touch those things and just kind of settle them in your heart. Settle them in your heart. Not so that you'll be settled, but that what He's wanting to do will be settled in you. That you will come to a peace with a thing that has brought discomfort to you. Notice I said peace, not comfort. More, Lord. So Lord, I thank you, Father, for your goodness. I thank you that you're constantly calling us to make demands on you. That you delight when we place a demand on you. Yes, Lord. Yes, Lord. Yes. More of your presence. More of your presence. Heaviness of your grace settling right now. Grace is settling right now. I bless every person here. Pray that you pour your mercy, favor on their life. Or may we have courage to make